Book 3, Let's Go Bingo. Chapter 1, Tickets. As an active socialite and as an avid competition entrant, Dumplings was used to getting a lot of post. She was on a lot of mailing lists from the clubs that she had joined and as a result of the competitions that she entered. Much of this was asking, in one way or another, for money. She had been too honest in the past when entering prize draws with survey questions. She had too often said that she was indeed bothered about child poverty, deforestation, animal cruelty, the availability of lady products and many other things. Consequently, she was inundated with requests for money and pictures of sad-looking donkeys. She knew better now and always entered any competition with accompanying survey questions as unhelpfully as possible. She was not, as far as they knew from now on, worried about dolphins or in fighting IBS or any other worthy cause. But still the competition entries and charity begging letters kept on coming. Dumplings pondered the free bingo tickets that fell out of one of the envelopes with caution. From another envelope she also got an invite to enter a competition to win a speedboat if she would agree to sponsor a hippopotamus called Rusty for just £3 per month. Dumplings was fond of the odd game of bingo. The speedboat could be re-gifted, and the hippo and she were definitely kindred spirits. The rest of the post went in the bin as none of it seemed worth bothering with. Dumplings looked at the letter and the tickets from Wood Green Upstairs Bingo again. The tickets looked genuine, and Dumplings had not been there for some time. There had been an unfortunate argument with a Mrs. Doris Humperdinck a few months ago and it had put Dumplings off from going back. Dumplings had gone to the bingo with Mr. Udegawa on their second date. Their first date was at a bus station where Mr. Udegawa had mistaken Dumplings for the escort he had ordered from London Big and Bouncy. At the bingo Mr. Udegawa had incorrectly called house, and Mrs. Doris Humperdinck claimed that this interruption had deprived her of the prize. This was as Doris had a full house on the next number but had failed to claim it due to the distraction of Mr. Udegawa's false call. Dumplings was not sure how true it was that Mr. Udegawa had cost Mrs. Humperdinck a deep fat fryer, which was the prize, but it had got nasty quickly. Dumplings was not one to be intimidated, but the aggression and bile coming from Doris was really something. Speaking to others, Dumplings had found out that Doris was part of a crew of old aggressive women who hung out at the bingo most nights. Dumplings had recently been feeling guilty that she had been neglecting her life partner, Mince, for her current squeeze, Sheila. These bingo tickets were the perfect opportunity for them to reconnect and have an adventure, just the two of them. Dumplings and Sheila had been inseparable of late. Sheila was using Dumplings' spare room as a liquor warehouse, so was often round to collect for deliveries or to drop off boxes. Sheila stayed over a couple of nights a week to save her the drive to Kent and to spend time with Dumplings. But Dumplings had not spent much time with Mince lately other than to hold his hand at the clinic the other week when his intermittent prolapse was very much mittent. Chapter 2, Parlour of Death. They met at the Wizard Sleeve pub where Dumplings sometimes worked. It was not, as such, an LGBT establishment, but given the council's policy of housing large lesbians in the neighbouring block of flats, it definitely had the feel. During the day there were often groups of large women making wind chimes at the tables. At night it was more popular with men, including taxi drivers, most of whom either Mince or Dumplings had gotten to know well over the years. They got the bus. It was hard to see the number as the bus approached as it was quite foggy. Not long later they were at a busy intersection in the Wood Green area of North London. The fog made it quite atmospheric, and if it weren't for the giant illuminated Home Bargains sign in the background, Mince thought they could be in a Dickensian novel as they crossed the car park. Wood Green Upstairs Bingo Parlour was not exactly on the doorstep from Dumplings' flat, but it was not too far either. There were closer places to go, but this had good food, and despite its name, the bingo parlour was mostly at ground level, which pleased Dumplings. Stairs were her enemy and lifts were not her friend, especially when she set the buzzer off. The land sloped down, so the entrance to the first floor where the parlour was actually at ground level. Dumplings and Mince sauntered into the parlour and took their seats. It turned out it was only free entry when you bought a massive tub of popcorn, but as Dumplings had already bought 2 tubs and started eating before she found out, it worked out fine. The first few bingo games went largely as expected. Mince and Dumplings, whilst not regulars, were no strangers to a dabber. Mince came close a few times, but no cigar or cigarette for that matter. Dumplings was nowhere near winning anything but still joined in the jeering when a false claim was made by a slapper in a sequined cowboy hat. "These hen parties really lower the tone," said Dumplings to Mince, washing her popcorn and hot dog down with a pint of Stella. There was a large bar, but Dumplings had been frustrated at how long it took to get served as she was surrounded by overexcited young women on a hen party and older women who were incredibly impolite. There had been a lot of pushing and shoving at the bar. But Dumplings' massive dumplings had come in handy and saw that she got served ahead of most of the hen party. The young man behind the bar had not been at all subtle in staring at Dumplings' cleavage, but then again, her outfit was not exactly subtle either. During the next pause, whilst the bingo caller checked the latest house claim, Mince surveyed the patrons and sniffed. In the past, the place would smell of cigarette smoke, but now the smell was a mix of fabric softener, wet dog, and disappointment. Mince did not say anything, as he also associated a similar smell with Dumplings' flat in Prince Charles Court. The patrons were mostly women, and mostly old women at that, with the exception of the hen party, who were all young women dressed in matching t-shirts and sparkly cowboy hats. The bride-to-be was wearing a veil and had L plates on her front and back. No man had caught Mince's eye except the bingo caller, who was looking better and better the more Mince drank. Dumplings also surveyed the scene and shuddered to eventually see Mrs. Doris Humperdinck wearing a purple wrap and busying herself organizing her dabbers. Dumplings thought she saw Doris out the corner of her eye earlier and indeed expected that she would be there, but the old bat had been keeping a surprisingly low profile. Doris was flanked by two hard-faced and wrinkled grannies who were probably great-grannies or even great-great-grannies, come to think of it. The last bingo game started and Mince and Dumplings were really getting into it. Not that they weren't taking it seriously from the start, but the last game had a prize of £10,000 or a lifetime supply of a product called Thrush Goblin. Dumplings' heart beat faster. She only needed one number. Mince's heart beat faster. Soon this would be over and he could have a cigarette. Then the call came. House. A dizzy blonde in the hen party waved her game card in the air. "If this is another false call, I swear to share there is going to be a murder," whispered Mince to Dumplings. The bingo caller shouted out the numbers and the blonde shouted back to confirm, all correct right up to the last number. The bingo caller called out the last number, but no response came. The blonde girl just stared straight ahead before flatulating loudly and falling forward, smashing into the table. She was dead as a doornail. There was a stunned silence at first and then much screaming and wailing. Dumplings quietly and respectfully got up and bought herself another tub of popcorn. Chapter 3. Another case for Mince and Dumplings. The police had been called, the bingo games were over, and Mince was having a sly cigarette leaning out of the window in the gents' toilets. Due to the gender ratio, the gents were not well used, although the floor was still very much wet. Mince heard a noise and saw the bingo caller come in. He nodded at Mince and sauntered over to the urinal. Mince continued his cigarette, barely leaning out of the window. "It's a real strong fog out there," said the bingo caller, nodding at the window. At first Mince thought this was a reference to him smoking before he looked at the window again, and indeed the fog level had increased dramatically. The two men finished their respective activities, Mince flinging the cigarette end out the window. The bingo caller went to wash his hands. "No sign of the police yet?" asked Mince. "Nothing yet," said the bingo caller, then saying, "They don't train you in bingo school for this," and they both smiled. The bingo caller asked Mince if he could borrow a cigarette, and the two of them shared a moment in the gents. When they came out, Mince went over to Dumplings, who had got another hot dog on the go, and got them each fresh pints of Stella. Mince told Dumplings about his conversation with the bingo caller. "He's called Dave, and I think he needs our help," said Mince, looking over at the hen party. The hen party were all standing by the stage consoling each other. All that is except for the blonde, who had suddenly died and was now partially covered over by a poncho donated from the costume of one of her friends. Elsewhere, groups of older women were gathered together sharing popcorn and hot dogs. Dave had asked that no one leave until the police arrive and had offered free popcorn and hot dogs to help ensure compliance. Nevertheless, some people had already left. Mince looked at Dumplings and Dumplings looked at Mince. "This looks like another case for Mince and Dumplings, ace amateur detectives," they whispered to each other so as not to offend the grieving. Dave came over to talk to Mince and Dumplings, who were the only people there about the same age as him. "I can't believe the police and ambulance haven't showed up yet," said Dave. Must be something to do with this thick fog, explained Mince. Dumplings informed Dave how she and Mince were quite adept at solving murders. Just this summer a man was stabbed on our cruise ship, said Dumplings, and then said, and just a few weeks back someone died suddenly at my mother's upscale nursing home when we visited. Dave did not look in any way reassured or comforted, but he felt in charge, out of his depth, and was happy for any help he could find. What do you think I should do? Asked Dave. Mince was thrilled to be asked. He pondered things and said, how can a fit young thing just drop dead in the middle of a bingo game? If it was a heart attack or anything not suspicious, there would have been some signs she was in distress, but she just pumped and died, contributed Dumplings. Did she actually win the game? Asked Mince. He had been addressing Dave, but Dumplings answered and said yes, when you were in the toilets, her game card was checked and she had indeed won £10,000. I suppose her next of kin gets the money, said Dave, sounding bewildered. The three of them decided to split up and see what they could do to help. Chapter 4. A Sip of Revenge. Dumplings first had a chat with the bereaved hen party who were drinking sparkling wine and sobbing. She asked if the dead woman, who was apparently called Chandelier, had any medical conditions. Mince went to look out the front and call the emergency services again. The operator told him that due to the fog there had been a major pile-up which was demanding resources and had snarled up the traffic. Mince could see for himself a lot of car headlights in the fog. They were very much static, the exhaust fumes were merging with the fog. Dave went round the other patrons and offered free drinks. Then he met up with Mince and they went downstairs to check the CCTV. The downstairs area was largely used for storage, though there were signs it had been used as a sweatshop not too long ago. Mince vaguely remembered hearing something about a triad gang a few years back. In a small room at the back was the security office. Inside, Mince and Dave found the security guard, Dennis, fast asleep. There was a strong herbal smell in the room that Mince associated with poverty and poor decisions. Dennis was all of 17 and was definitely not university material. They roused him and together the three of them looked over the recordings for the night. Upstairs, Dumplings was subtly asking the other patrons some questions. She took a deep breath and went over to the dreaded Mrs. Doris Humperdinck and her posse. Hi Doris, hi girls, said Dumplings, uncharacteristically nervous as she walked towards the gang of old women. Doris put down her drink, sniffed and looked away as if ignoring Dumplings. She must have had a change of heart as she then turned to Dumplings and said, "Oh hello Louise, I'm surprised to see you back here again." Doris said this through a menacing half-smile. "Awful business this, isn't it?" noted Dumplings, nodding to the hen party. "We had it worse during the Blitz," replied Doris. Dumplings was no maths wizard but thought it a stretch that Doris was old enough to remember the war. Dumplings asked the women if they had seen anything suspicious, but the reply, "Only you in that top," from Doris made Dumplings want to leave them to it. However, having another apparent change of heart, Doris adopted a more conciliatory tone and asked Dumplings if she would like a drink. "Maybe it's time to leave the past in the past," said the old crone, fumbling, then sliding a glass of ginger ale towards Dumplings. Dumplings was about to take a sip, seeing it as a goodwill gesture, when Mince came running at her and knocked the glass clean out of her hand, spilling ginger ale on the already dirty carpet. "We know everything," said Mince dramatically. "We saw her on CCTV put something into that poor girl's drink," said Dave, pointing at Doris. Mrs. Humperdinck looked at her nails and casually said, "It shouldn't have killed her, but maybe it's because I used a hippopotamus-sized dose." "I was actually aiming for that fat hippo," she continued, pointing at Dumplings. "Yes, we know. The CCTV shows you leaning over behind Dumplings at the bar pouring powder into a glass," said Mince. He paused and then said, "But Dumplings was drinking pints, and the drink you spiked was the sparkling wine of the unfortunate young lady you so rudely pushed in front of. I've been keeping the poison in my purse for months. I knew she would be back to show her ignorant face at some point again," said Doris, pointing at Dumplings. "It should only have given someone that big violent diarrhea. Fitting payback, I think, for my lost deep fat fryer," she added. Doris paused for a moment and looked at her nails again, before saying, "Shame I put it in the wrong glass." At that moment the police finally arrived, followed shortly afterwards by a paramedic. "You can charge this one with murder," Mince informed the police, pointing at Mrs. Doris Humperdinck. "Is it also attempted murder?" asked Dumplings. "To be fair, she wasn't actually trying to kill you or anyone else," said Dave. Charge this one with manslaughter and attempted diarrhea, said Mince to the baffled police officers. Epilogue. Mince and Dumplings decided that they must come back for bingo at least once a month from now on. Notwithstanding the unfortunate death, they had really enjoyed it. On their next visit, they were pleased that Doris was nowhere to be seen, and when Mince and Dumplings were able to speak to Dave during the first break, they found out that Doris had been charged with manslaughter and was currently on remand. Apparently, she has a history of vengeful behavior, said Dave before he told them of a time she had used her mobility scooter to knock down a schoolboy in Home Bargains who had knocked her by accident. At the end of the games, Dumplings went to get a hot dog and Mince went to have a cigarette in the gents. Dave followed him in. Not long afterwards, the three of them met back up at the table and Dumplings wondered if she should tell Dave that his fly was down. I was just thinking, said Dumplings, now munching on popcorn. Yes, replied Mince and Dave together. Well, said Dumplings, swallowing her popcorn down with some Stella, then adding, do you think it's strange, Mince, that just about everywhere we go, someone dies? Pondered Mince, then he said, I never really thought of it, but it never bothered Angela Lansbury. I suppose it's always been true that mystery and intrigue follow us at every corner, said Dumplings. They all agreed that that was true and not to overthink it.